Hey everyone, welcome back for some more geometry. For this video, we're going to be practicing how to notate, so using the correct symbols to distinguish parallel, intersecting, and perpendicular lines. For this first part, we're just going to determine whether or not these sets of lines are parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting. So up at the top, it gives you 3 examples. So here's the first one. I see 2 lines here that are not touching and they are evenly spaced out and both pointing towards the left and the right. So this says line AB and line CD are parallel lines. They never cross even if they are extended. So what that means is you could continue this line forever in both directions, same with this one, and since they're evenly spaced, they're never going to cross. Remember this little line right above AB, that's how we show a line. That's how we use our symbols. When we read and write geometry, you have to use those symbols. So that means line, and then your points are always labeled with capital letters. So line AB and line CD. Intersecting lines, so this says line EF and GH are intersecting lines. They cross each other at point M. So right here is where they cross. But since they don't form a 90-degree angle, they are just intersecting lines. And the last one is perpendicular lines. Line IJ and line KL are perpendicular lines. They form right angles where they cross. So they see this little red square? That shows us that that's a right angle formed right there. So we know this is a special kind of intersecting lines called perpendicular lines. For number 1 through 3, it says right parallel, perpendicular, or intersecting for each. So number 1, the lines aren't touching yet, but if you look at them, the spacing is not equal. So down here, they're getting a little bit closer together. So that means if you extend these, I'm going to extend line TS, and I'm going to extend line UV. Eventually, these lines are going to cross, but see how they're kind of slanted? They're not crossing completely straight. That means they're just intersecting. They're going to cross, but they're not going to cross to what looks like a T, so they won't form any 90-degree angles. So those are intersecting lines. Number 2, I have line WX and line YZ. If I look at these, the space in the middle, it's even. They are evenly spaced, and I can extend both of these lines in either direction. And as you extend, you can even draw it with your pencil or use a ruler. They will never touch each other. And since those lines will never touch each other, they are parallel lines. And number 3, I have line KJ and line LM. So if I extend these lines in this direction, they're getting more and more and more spaced out. Whereas if I extend them at the top, they're coming together and they're eventually going to cross over one another. So these lines are intersecting. They're not touching yet, but they will touch because this space is getting smaller down here. Okay, for numbers 4 through 9, the directions say right parallel, intersecting, or perpendicular for each. So this first one, I have line NO and line PQ. Right here is where they cross over each other, so that's where those lines meet. And they do not form 90-degree angles. So there are no right angles, but since they cross, they are intersecting. Number 5, I have line FG and line HI. There's an even amount of space in here, It's not changing, it's not getting smaller or bigger towards either end. I can extend these lines forever and they will never touch. So that makes them parallel. For number 6, I have line BC and line DF. You can see they're crossed over each other right here. And there's a little tiny angle right here, and a really large angle on the sides. So since they are crossing over but not forming any right angles, those lines are intersecting. Number 7, I have line ST and line VU. Notice I have that little square marked on my paper. That means that's a right angle. So there's a right angle where these lines cross right here at the middle. They cross to form a right or a 90-degree angle. So that makes them perpendicular. For number 8, I have line AB and line DC. Notice how there's a lot more space at the top between those two lines, and as it goes towards the bottom, it gets smaller. So eventually, those lines will intersect. They will cross over one another, but they will not form a right angle, so they are just intersecting. And number 9, these lines have not crossed each other yet. I have line LM and line JK. If I extend line LM, it goes right through line JK and it forms like an upside down T. Where those lines meet, since they meet at a completely straight point, it forms a right angle. So those lines are perpendicular. Now on this page, we're going to practice using the symbolic notation to help us answer these questions. Now when we write geometry, we always use those special symbols. So parallel, intersecting, and perpendicular lines. We have this diagram up at the top that we're going to use to answer these questions. So the directions say answer the following using the illustration above. Number 1 says which line is parallel to line GH. Line GH is right here. So it's that vertical line that's going up and down. And I'm looking for something that is parallel to this line right here. Well, parallel means it has to be evenly spaced, and it's never going to touch. So I'm just going to drag my pen this way, and I land on line AB. If I extend line AB, and I can keep extending line GH, they will never hit. Those lines are parallel. So I'm going to write my symbol for line, which is that little line on top, and a capital letter to label line A, B. So line AB is parallel to line GH. Number 2 says name 4 lines that intersect EF. EF is right here. So already I can see that there's 2 lines that are intersecting line EF. One of those is this one right here. Those lines cross over to form that point. They form angles right there, but none of those are right angles, so it's just an intersecting line. So line LM also, up here, I see this line intersects with it. Again, there's not a right angle formed. So line JK. Now it says name 4. So now I need to think about what would happen if I extended line EF. And then I extend my two lines in this diagram that are going vertical. When I extend my lines, you can see that line GH will also intersect with line EF. And line AB will also intersect with line EF. So they're crossing over, so they're intersecting, they're just not forming a right angle. So they're just regular intersecting lines. Okay. Number 3 says name two lines that are perpendicular to AB. So here's AB. I want two lines that are perpendicular. So that means those lines cross over and form a 90-degree angle. So right here I see AB is crossing over line JK, and that does form a right angle. So since they are crossing like a T, it forms a right angle. So line AB is perpendicular to line JK. Line AB is also perpendicular to line LM. If I extend this, if I extend line LM and I extend line AB, they will cross like a T. So that will form a 90-degree angle. Number 4 says how many lines are parallel to EF. Here's EF right here. It's a diagonal line. And now I want to see what lines are parallel to that. Well, you can drag your pen or pencil over. And so one line, line CD, is evenly spaced and it will never cross over EF. So just one line is parallel. So how many lines are parallel to EF? One. And that's line CD. And number 5 says, does line CD intersect line GH? Explain. So here is line CD, and here is line GH. If you extend both of those, yes, those lines will intersect. They'll eventually cross right over without forming a right angle, so they are just intersecting. So yes, line CD intersects GH. So lines CD and GH continue in both directions forever, and they will eventually cross.